I'm Stanley Leong with Chu Wei Lin. Thank you for joining us today on Money Mind on CNA 938, where we have more thought-provoking conversations unfurling this hour. Now, today we want to talk about disruption, but not in the way a pandemic has dramatically shaken things up for us in the way we live and how we work and play, but rather disruption and based on the topic of innovation. Innovation and the people behind it that have disrupted our lives in a myriad of ways and continue to do so.
But rather than let the brainchild of innovators rush us by and shape our lives, we put the brakes on that for a while to revisit the philosophy of innovation and look at the responsibility of innovators with fresh eyes. Our guest today is a philosopher. He is Professor of Innovation at the ESSEC Business School, Xavier Pavie. Thanks very much for joining us, Professor. Now, the Cambridge Dictionary defines innovation as a new idea or method or the use of new ideas or methods. Do you think this is perhaps an incomplete understanding of what innovation really is?
Good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. It's a very good question, actually, because most of the people believe that innovation is mostly something new and mostly a product, which is not exactly what innovation is. Innovation is basically four categories of innovation. We have four categories of innovation. It could be a product for sure, but it also could be a process. It could be a commercialization. It could be an organization as well. So that's why we have four categories of innovation and mostly 3 degrees of innovation. And 3 degrees of innovation are basically incremental innovations. We have disruptive innovation, as you just mentioned, as well as paradigmatical innovation. It means that innovation itself does not exist. We have innovations, plural.
Okay. This is going to be interesting as we understand more about innovation and really different from the way most of the world would understand it to be. Now, Professor, you've written that if what we want for the future of humanity through innovation is the preservation of humanity or its advancement, then innovation must be reconsidered. But why should we reconsider it? Because aren't those already in itself noble causes and powerful motivators to propel those who are in the business of innovating?
Actually, innovation is the only way to survive. Just to give you a feedback on that, innovation comes from the Latin word innovare. In means inside, novare means change. So you have to change inside yourself, it could be your body, or inside your company in order to survive due to the environment. So that's a very important point. The second point, which is very important as well, is innovation is everywhere, all the time. If we are able to talk this morning, it's because we have a full of innovation. We have a camera, we have a sound, we have a TV, we have a mic, and so on and so forth. Innovation is everywhere all the time. The question we need to ask ourselves right now is, at what cost should we continue to innovate? At what cost? Because we know that thanks to or because of innovations, we harm the planet. We have so many political issues with innovation, for instance, with social network, as well as the issue what we can get on humanity, human species, due to innovation. So innovation is everywhere, no doubt, but at what cost should we continue to innovate? So that was the main point of what I write down.
Right. So it's really like a tool, but ultimately, what end result will it achieve for good or for bad for humanity?
Definitely. And the question is basically why we do the thing we do. That's probably the most important question, and probably we forgot to ask our question that, because we are such as like a crushed by innovation. We definitely want to innovate to survive in a company, to make profit, basically, which is the only way to survive for a company. And again, at what cost? And this question is very important because actually the question behind innovation, which is probably to me the most important question, we have always an innovator behind every single innovation. So the question behind is why an innovator wants to do that? Why, as an innovator, I want to create a company, a startup? Why I want to launch this new product? Why I want to commercialize in a different way? And so on and so forth. And then we have to think to ourselves, is it to get a better salary? Is it to get a better career? Is it to get a promotion? Is it because I got so many pressure from my company, from my boss? Is it because I want to kill the competitors? Why we do the thing we do? Is it very important question because we know that every single innovation can harm the planet, can harm human species, can bring so many complexity and political issues. And then we do things. So that's for a reason. What is the reason? Why every single day some people wake up and say that I want to get a better promotion, I want to get more richer, I want to have a better salary, or maybe I want to improve, to increase my social status. Okay, guys, but at what cost? That's the question we need to ask. Because nowadays, innovation is every single place.
So it sounds like you are calling for responsible innovation.
Definitely. Responsibility comes from also a Latin word, respondere. Respondere, you have to be accountable of what you do. Being accountable of what you do is not just launching a new smartphone, launching a new device. When you have more than billions, 1 billion per year just selling devices, actually all devices, it could be a tablet, it could be a smartphone, it could be a computer, for instance. We have more than 6 billion per year. And basically, we don't recycle them, not at all. We have to think about ourselves. Do we need 6 billions of smartphones, tablets, and so on and so forth every single year when you know that you won't be able to recycle them? So actually, if you want to become responsible, the first thing that we need to think is how are we going to produce it? How could we build it? Because basically, when you have your smartphone, you need to think about the rare earth, you need to think about the consumptions, and then the consumption of the product itself. And then at the end, the recycling of the product. So it's full of issues, but we don't think about it. We think about launching the new smartphone or the new tablet with a better screen, with a larger screen, maybe with a better battery, but it doesn't work like that. We need to be responsible about what you do. And being innovative, it's also being responsible.
Right, and while we're hearing you out, it also comes to mind the fact that what you're saying also is very much tied into, say, the work that we choose to do, our occupation, our profession. It reminds me of a time where I had met with a Singaporean who was working overseas, and that person was a game designer, online games and such, designing such games. And after really thinking through the person's purpose and the work that the person is involved in, he realized that all that person was doing was to inculcate addiction, gaming addiction for thousands and thousands of people because of the work that he was doing, producing all these games that get young people hooked on it day and day to night. So yeah, it coming back to the topic of what you tell us about what ultimately is the objective or the end result of the innovation that we are engaged in at work, for instance. Very interesting to talk about. We would like also our listeners to participate on our conversations. You've got a question for Professor Xavier Pavie today on our program as we talk about the philosophy of innovation, as we revisit the notion and concept of innovation. Do call through with your questions or comments and thoughts about this matter. And our number is 963, that's 669, I beg your pardon, 669-11938. And to text us, it is 963-11938.
Now, Professor, you did ask at what cost should we be pursuing innovation, but I do want to ask you, who should be the final arbiter or decision maker when it comes to deciding whether a new product or idea should go ahead or not? Because there are some questionable products out there which do affect society, but ultimately it's ruled by market forces, isn't it?
Right, it's a huge and big question. Actually, I will give you an example. For instance, when Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg, many people believe that you're responsible of what you do because actually the data that you use at Facebook, for instance, it has been given to other companies and you commercialize actually data of someone. So actually, you're responsible. The answer from Mark Zuckerberg was people choose to upload their photos, their videos, their photos, and so on and so forth. So he said, yeah, but basically they are responsible. Nobody forced you to do it. And that's a big question. Who is responsible of that? I will give you another example and go back to the social network with Facebook. If a car maker will give you the key and tell you, here is a car and you can drive wherever you want, that's fine. Yeah, but it doesn't work like that. You need to have a driving license. And then when you have a driving license, you can get the car and you can drive. What about the social network now? Let's go back to this point. Of course, if you go to the different rules in Facebook page, for instance, you can find plenty of things. But did you get it? Did you get the keys? Did you get the driving license to use Facebook? In other words, do you know every single thing? The answer is no. So actually, who is responsible? Am I responsible of this non-education of Facebook or non-education of social network? And then the responsibility belongs to the one who gave the key. And one who gave the key, it's Mark Zuckerberg, because he gave the key to someone without educating them. In other words, let me rephrase. When we don't know what's happened behind, the responsible of this innovation is definitely the innovator itself, because you don't know what's happened behind. How could I know when I post a photo that maybe someone else will commercialize it? I don't know. Maybe it's mentioned in a very, very long rules of Facebook, but nobody do that. So who is responsible if not the innovator? Let me give you another example. With technological things, nanotechnology, for instance, or maybe artificial intelligence, how it works, nobody knows. Nobody knows how it works. Just a couple of engineers, they know that. How could I ask to my mother, 85 years old, to know that how Facebook works, how artificial intelligence works, how nanotechnology works? Not at all. So actually, the innovator knows. Do you know? That's for you. There is the questions. Do you know how many rare earths we use in a smartphone? No, of course not. Do you know that most of the devices that we use, smartphones, tablets, and so on, most of them, when we don't use them, we're going to send them to Ghana in Africa, and they will lay down into beaches. So you can imagine that? Nobody knows that. But innovators knows that. So basically, the first responsibility belongs to the innovator, not the user, because the user is not educated to do that. Of course, it can be, but not most of them. When you have more than 2 billion of users of Facebook, you cannot ask them to be educated to use it. So definitely, the responsibility belongs first to the innovator. And it's too easy for Mark Zuckerberg or company to say that I put the product on the market and then you can manage that.
A huge responsibility on the shoulders of innovators as well. But what solutions then would we have to get out of this problem if many innovators are not quite doing just that with all these really deep reflections?
It's a good point. And it's not very easy, actually, because I'm pretty sure that so many people will tell me that, yeah, but you have competitors. You have competitors around you. So if I don't do that, someone else will do. It's a big issue. It's not totally true, because most of the times you can get an agreement. Many, for instance, telecommunications companies, they have an agreement. Many computers companies, they have also agreements of something. For instance, the plug is the same for every single computer maker. It could be about telecommunications. They have the same standards with the 5G, the 4G, and so on. So why not having all together an agreement about, yes, we won't do this, or we won't do that, or we do that together or not. That's the first point. And when I push myself a bit more about those kind of thoughts, I have two things in mind. The first one is I truly believe that we need to be responsible for what we do. And the philosophical way can help us to think about it. The philosophy can help us because the philosophy can take the distance between what we do and what we have to do. So the purpose of the philosophy is to increase the thought of the people. And that's very important. If you increase the distance, you have a step back of what you do, you can think before you do. Or you can do, but you can do it, you can think about it. That's very important for the philosophical things. And there is another thing, which is, and I can continue on the philosophical part maybe a little bit later, but the second thing is, I've realized with lots of studies, lots of researchers, that if you are more responsible, you will get a better performance, which is actually the best argument ever. You can imagine that if you're responsible, you have a better performance, you have a better revenue, you have a better profit. So basically, there is no reason actually to become non-responsible.
Professor Pavie, looks like we have to leave it there and point listeners to your book, or we could just sign up for class and sit in at your your business school and
Sure.
your lectures at the ESSEC Business School. We have been speaking with Professor of Innovation at the ESSEC Business School, Professor Xavier Pavie, and he's also written a book titled Critical Philosophy of Innovation and the Innovator, published by Wiley, and you can find out more about it on online at wiley.com. Professor Pavie, thank you so much for your time. We wish we had more time with you, but definitely have left us a lot of food for thought, especially those who are in the work of innovating. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.